How's everybody doing? Welcome back to another episode of Boys in the Zone. I am here with Zach from Pulse of the Star on Twitter. If you are not, go ahead and follow this guy. He's just starting up. Really, really good
How's everybody
guy,
doing?
and overall has some good knowledge of ball. And with that being said, Zach, how are you doing tonight, man?
Doing great, man. Excited to be here. I appreciate you having me back on. I'm ready to talk some football. There's a lot going on right now, so let's go ahead and get to it.
And my dude's got the team polo on, looking like he works for the team. He's ready.
Of course, of course.
So first, let's just jump straight into the preseason game two. Obviously, the big standout, Jalen Tolbert, second year player from South Alabama. What impressed you the most from him in that second preseason game?
I think he's just coming into this season, especially in training camp. He's a lot more comfortable breaking down in his routes, getting out of them, getting inside of receivers or inside of cornerbacks. His ability to actually read who's across from him and adapt to what's going on during a play has really impressed me versus last year, where it kind of seemed like he was just going through the motions, maybe wasn't clear on what was going on or what was being asked of him. So just looks way more comfortable. He looks like he's just going out there and playing ball. There's nothing more to it, nothing scripted for him. He's just going out there and doing what he can do.
Absolutely, man. I couldn't agree with that more. I think that right now you're seeing his confidence level get that much better from year one to year two. Just his ability, like you said, to understand the cornerback's leverage on a play, when to cross face, when to give him that little stutter step and then take off on the go routes. Had that huge gain on 3rd and 7 when Cooper Rush underthrew him a little bit, but still made the adjustment, worked back to the ball and caught that ball. Huge
Yeah,
plays. I think almost every single one of his receptions was on 3rd down, if I'm not mistaken. We can
yeah,
review some
yeah,
tape later, but overall, just a huge step up from what we saw. And another string game for this player who had a nice little game one, comes back, puts this together. I think solidifying himself as wide receiver four going into the season. And talk about those bubble wrap
absolutely.
players, man. He's one of those guys that I probably don't want to see game three as far as preseason goes. Just
No,
keep him healthy, especially with what we're going to be talking about next. DeMarvion Overshown, unfortunately, the big injury. What are your thoughts on that, man?
man. Oh man, I've explained this to you before that he's actually from my hometown area, and so I've got a little bit of personal bias towards him. Being able to see him go out and immediately make a leadership impact on that team,
Yeah.
everybody gravitates towards him and follows him into what he's doing. For him to make a really athletic play, I mean, looked like a little bit of an awkward tackle, but for hit that closing speed after getting picked a little bit before he got out.
Mm.
Into that flat, making that awkward tackle was still actually a really impressive play. And it really sucks to see him go down on something on a high note.
Yeah. Um, Let me just take note of the chat here. Shout out to my boy Jace in the chat. Shout out to my wife, Kaylin. Also, my daughter Emmy is also watching. Got my boy Eric in
Nice.
here, and he has a question for us later in the show. We can answer as well. Had to show my nod to the chat, and but yeah, just getting back to Overshown, man. Um, such a brutal injury, ACL tear. He's probably going to be out the entire season. We saw how that kind of hindered Gallup on his return last season. So this really is what a lot of people consider a 2-year injury. Obviously, the rehab and getting back to normal with the first year and the second year to kind of trust it. Do you see it like that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't want to rush anything too much, especially at the linebacker position of all position groups.
Mm.
Luckily, this does happen in training camp. I don't want to say luckily as if it's a good thing, but suffering it late in the year, maybe when you need him most or when he's progressed. If it's going to happen at any point, let it happen now. Let him adapt to all of his recovery and to the NFL for another year and reevaluate next season and see where he's at.
Mm. I almost wish he could have got like 3 or 4 games under his belt just so I could see what he had in an actual NFL game. Because, I
Sure.
mean, how I saw this draft pick, I mean, 3rd rounder, you bring him in, he has some versatility, linebacker, safety. You think of a player
Yeah.
that's on the last year of their contract in Jaron Curse. you would have liked to see what Overshown had if you could, if he could kind of be that bridge player until Overshown is ready in next year. But now you don't get any idea of what he is as a player, minus the little bit of preseason reps that he got. So a bummer for me, especially, and I just thought that he had so much leadership, as you mentioned earlier, for such a young player. Was wearing that green dot on his helmet in the preseason, so that speaks volumes. So another player that also got injured, same injury, ACL tear, John Stevens, tight
Man.
end. What was your thoughts on him?
That almost hurts as much as DeMarvian, just because you take maybe your top three, top five standouts from this past training camp and from these two preseason games, and those were two of those three, five, whatever you want to call it. John Stevens, I personally thought that he had a real chance going into game three to maybe make this 53-man roster, depending on what McKeon looks like, what they want to use him as. But just his skill set at getting to the ball, it reminds me of Ferguson, a little bit smaller. The
Yeah,
blocking obviously needs to progress, but he's changing a completely different position almost coming into the league.
yep, yep.
It just really sucks to see him go down without, kind of like you mentioned with DeMarvian, without a real chance to prove what he could do if he is in a regular season game.
Yeah, so with John Stevens, for me, it was a little bit different on the injury side of things. Obviously, you wanted to see him if he could make the team, but now this gives you that flexibility to hopefully stash him. You know, see what you have in some of these other players. If Hendershot comes into this season and he's behind a Ferguson and Schoonmaker, and really isn't showing you anything in the blocking game, and isn't overwhelmingly good in the receiving game, I could see the Cowboys moving off of him in the future, and in
Yeah,
for John Stevens. So interesting to see that. Obviously, Hendershot, he was good last year. You want to see him progress as well, but the tight end room, I was really starting to like, a bunch of young guys on this room, but just that, that raw ability, that athletic ability to make things happen. The blocking wasn't completely there for a lot of the players, minus McEwen and
no,
Schoonmaker. But overall, the tight end room looked very young and very solid as a group. This one hurt. Um, Now
yeah,
another
and I mean,
player. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say I felt a little bit more comfortable over the last week and a half as far as the blocking actually went for that tight end room. Having John Stevens, like you say, stashed away, maybe that's something that he can progress on his own after recovery or going into the next season, seeing what their options are there.
Hmm.
But as far as the blocking within that room, I'm not too concerned. I am concerned about Hendershot though, and his abilities overall. Taking a second round pick or that flyer on a tight end that you don't know is going to come in and replace Schultz or what Ferguson's going to do. I just feel really bad for Stevens to not be able to prove that maybe Hendershot and him are a little tighter than people would have thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the Cowboys organization, whether it was just the youngness of this tight end room, or if they didn't trust them enough as pros, uh, it was an indictment on that group whenever they used a second round pick on Luke Schoonmaker.
Yeah,
Now
absolutely.
I was not really completely on board with that pick. That's been documented. You can come back in 3 years if Schoonmaker's an all pro. I would gladly eat my words. But overall, you have to think that there was something up with the tight end room, why they spent such a high draft capital on a tight end. So, if that's the case, you have to think that Hendershot, McEwen, some of those guys that were already in the building, might not have made this 53-man roster. Now, I think that Hendershot is absolutely safe with John Stevens going down.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll see with McEwen and Hunter Lipke possibly playing some tight end, but I don't think either of those guys are going to knock off Hendershot. It would be a surprise to me. Do you don't see that either?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you completely. I
Yeah.
mean, Luepke's it's a great safety option, I suppose. But if you're wanting to go in full strength with the tight end room, especially to an injury with someone with promise, you go with what you trust or have trusted in the last year or so.
Yep. And excuse me. Another one of the injuries that happened was Matt Farniak with his shoulder injury. Did you have any thoughts on that or hear anything?
Did you mean well let's go? Matt,
Or
well let's
well,
go?
let's go. Well, let's go. Yep.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. No, yeah, I mean, it's tough. I've seen a couple things about that. He is questionable for game three. It's not the same shoulder that he had surgically repaired a year ago, ending that first season. So,
Mhm.
I don't know that there's too much concern. I mean, as far as his ability to come in and still progress after an injury, I have no idea because last game, his pass protection seemed regressed from beforehand. I
Yeah.
don't think. I mean, right out the gate, almost he got beat straight off the edge. Did not get any depth in his pass set, and it's concerning to see that coming this far into it. I understand the injury can set you back a little bit, but to get injured again while not showing really any progression from week one to week two,
Mhm.
that's a tough one for Will. Let's go.
And that's another thing about it is I've heard some talks about it possibly being hereditary, kind of a shoulder deal with that I forgot what they call it, subflexion or something like that along the lines in those
Yeah,
shoulders. I'm not a doctor, so don't quote me on that. But um,
no, I'm not going to
but
correct you.
with him, shoulders, arms, obviously your hips, all of those things are extremely important for an offensive lineman, especially for a tackle. I mean, you talk about somebody that has to hand fight the entire time they're dealing with a pass rusher coming off the edge. I wouldn't say that that's, doesn't hold any weight. Obviously, they want to see him progress, and they've felt good about him in the building. But from what I've seen in preseason, I'm not really sure about this offensive line with the depth there. I like our starting five, obviously. Excuse me. My question to you would be: would you go outside and look for other options, either a trade or a cut from another team whenever 53-man rosters do get cut down?
Yeah, it's actually funny. Me and Brendan had a conversation on Twitter not too long ago, a couple days ago about this. It depends on how comfortable they are with the flexibility of who they have. Speaking of someone like Asim Richards, who they've tried both at tackle and guard, seems much more comfortable at tackle, but with that question, if this or if that, to me, it seems like you almost have to at least look. You have to go outside and at
Yeah.
least look at what's available. You have too many young guys and too many projects on this offensive line to just go through one more week and say, okay, we're good with these guys. You can look for a vet presence, somebody. Idoga is supposed to be coming back relatively soon.
Hmm.
There's some insurance for you there, but like I said, you don't know how long these injuries are going to linger. You don't know what's going to happen to Idoga going forward with this injury. There's just too many questions there to not at least do your
Due
what's
diligence.
Steven's due diligence, Steven's
Yeah.
favorite saying. Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah. And for me, I mean, they have so many guys in the building that they quote unquote like. They have Hoffman, they have Josh Ball, they have Wiletsko, they have Farniak. All of those guys, we like our guys. That saying only goes so far. You have to show it on the field, and you have to be there. I mean, the best ability is availability in the end of at the end of the day. So, um, I think personally, you do have to do your due diligence. Go out there, find somebody. You have one of the best player personnel guys in Will McClay. Find one of those guys that were a highly touted draft pick that are kind of on the outs with their team currently. Make a trade, a fifth rounder. I don't care. Go get some depth, honestly. Um, so we got a question in here, or more of a statement. But Eric said, "I think that they got Luke. I'm assuming this is Luke Schoonmaker, because he was proficient as a run blocker in college. So, do you think that they're going to use Schoonmaker more as a blocker, inline blocker, or is he going to be featured in the passing game a lot?
I, it's hard for me to believe that they go second round for a run blocking tight end.
Mm,
With how they're spreading out this offense right now, the amount of speed, the receiver room now, I just don't see them looking for a tight end that primarily blocks like McKeon, which they already have, and not try to
same
develop
school.
him as a pass catcher. Yeah, exact same school. I mean, you know how the tight ends are from Michigan. They get down and dirty, and that's perfectly fine. That's
Hmm.
actually perfect. But when you want to feature a little bit more, uh, you go a little bit higher in the draft for those kind of guys. So I completely expect Schoonmaker to come out and start to make some plays. He had a couple nice catches last game. So, the blocking is going to be fine. Hopefully, he can continue to progress in his route game and catching abilities.
Yeah. So, for me to echo what you were saying there, why I wasn't really on board with the Schoonmaker pick was just one, his age,
Yeah.
two, he wasn't really great as a pass catching tight end in college. I think he had like a career like 700 yards for his entire career
Yeah.
at Michigan. I
Yeah.
not a lot. Now that's not to say that Michigan is some high flying offense. They're not. They really lean on their
Mhm.
run game, so they require their tight ends to be a run blocker. I get that, but for me, I just saw so much more value in some of the other tight ends that went off the board after him and or a
Yeah.
different player in the draft. Now, that's not me hating on Schoonmaker. He has a star on his helmet. I'm going to support the kid. I hope the best for him, and I hope that he is an All Pro one day. But just from what I was seeing, what I saw from the returns from Hendershot, from Ferguson last year, I thought that those guys were good enough where you didn't have to address tight end early in the draft unless it was a true difference maker like a Dalton Kincaid. Were you kind of on the same board there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was even on board of the Darnell Washington train, regardless of injuries or not.
Same.
But I mean, it's you look simply at metrics and see what these guys' abilities are, and it did confuse me. I have to completely agree when Schoonmaker was picked, just because of what his abilities are and what you're looking for with Schultz's departure. It just
Yep.
didn't make much sense to me having, like you said, Hendo and Ferguson in house already.
So this is a good point by the chat. He said, "I mean, with CD, Cooks, Gallup, linebackers worried about Pollard's speed, Schoonmaker should be wide open by proxy." So I agree with that, but there's only so many balls to go around. I mean, are you really going to look at Schoonmaker um, on a 5 yard in or a dig or something like over the middle versus CD that's going across on some type of sluggo scheme? Probably not. Now, with that being said, obviously he's probably going to be able to sit in zones a lot like Dalton Schultz did in the past. And Dak does like his tight ends, but for me, I think that Ferguson gets that first nod in the passing game. Obviously, you can use Schoonmaker in it as an inline blocking tight end, and then you have certain plays where he
Absolutely.
comes out and he looks like he's going to block, but comes out and hits that out route for the easy touchdown, stuff like that. I fully anticipate all of that because it's kind of what the Cowboys do.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but overall, I think that this tight end room has a lot of promise. They have the blocker guys, they have the pass catching guys. It's just a wait and see game until the season starts. But I'm very encouraged with what Ferguson can do. I don't even believe that he played in that second preseason game just because they saw enough from him that first one. Am I
No,
wrong?
yeah, no, it was Hendo actually out there with the ones, I believe, and then Schoonmaker and McKeon started to roll in as the game progressed. But no, I think you just made a great point of it in the first game. What they thought he could do, he confirmed and elevated coming into training camp in game one.
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything else that you need to see from him. Uh, More so, you want to see more from Schoonmaker coming off of that injury and what he can develop into possible tight end two, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. No, I think Ferguson should be bubble wrapped.
Yeah. And now, did you catch that tweet on Twitter that was basically alluding to the thought that Deuce Vaughn is already drawing so much attention from linebackers? Did you see that one yet?
I don't believe so.
So it was just that whole drive where Will Greer was just driving down the field using his tight ends on quick rollout screens and stuff like that.
Right.
They basically shaded or they basically play action to Deuce, acted
Mhm.
like he was going to get a handoff, and it pulled all of the linebackers up and allowed for deep completions to the tight ends. So
Wow.
very interesting. Just
Yeah.
seeing how Deuce is already kind of drawing that attention. Now, with that being said, he gets the carry at the very end and he solidifies it with a touchdown, breaking that arm tackle going in. What do you think Deuce Vaughn's honest projection for this season can be?
You know, if I were to make a 53-man roster right now, probably listing Dowdle as number two, but that's absolutely not discrediting what Deuce has done this preseason so far.
Mhm.
It's actually a great point about drawing attention from the linebackers because the play that he ended up scoring on, what he did on that play is exactly why linebackers are following him or watching him because they can't catch up. They can't
Mhm.
see or they don't understand where he's going to go. It's really hard to read and react to that kind of talent, especially at that kind of size.
Yeah.
Um, as far as like a stat line projection, I'm not too for sure. I would really like him in the red zone, just because of his behind the line of scrimmage abilities in the screen game. Seeing what he can do over the middle, we saw that great catch in game one on the Texas route. He's so shifty and he can get inside of whoever is covering him. That we talked about specific packages being there for him. I don't think he's going to be some type of huge rushing threat. We saw a couple times which the offensive line did not help him out very much last game.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's going to be a third down kind of guy that's going to plunge you for some yards. Dowdle has got the facilities for that. But Deuce, I would love to see a ton in the passing game and what his abilities are, to make people miss in the backfield, and then just yak ability after that.
Yeah, I think that I was super excited for the passing game for Deuce Vaughn initially, but then I saw what he could do as a runner, just hiding behind that line of scrimmage, behind the offensive line, and then exploding through. The linebackers are at complete awe because they can't see him. He's five
Yeah.
five. Most of the offensive linemen in this league are 6 foot or above, so
Right.
they're sunk in their heels. They're sunken in the mud, and then he explodes out. He's full speed. You're still in your stance trying to read and react as a linebacker, and he blows straight
Yeah.
past you. That is one facet of the game I don't think enough Cowboys content creators and people are talking about, truthfully, is just his ability to hide behind that line and explode through it, break those arm tackles and stuff like that, and then get extra yards. Now, I made a point that Jalen Hyatt, the third round pick for the Giants, Tennessee wide receiver, you could see this guy kind of being like a three catch guy, or a two catch for 87 yards. I mean, he can
Yeah.
catch those long balls and get those things. Realistically, for Deuce Vaughn, if he got 8 carries a game, he could be churning in 50 some yards on 8 carries just because of his ability to be wiggly, squirmy,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, just juke defenders straight out of their shoes. What do you think about that?
I mean, he kind of proved it game one. He averaged 6.3 yards a carry on the limited snaps that he did have. But you're right. In fact, his patience is incredible,
Yeah.
for being a first year guy, for being as small as he is, a late round draft pick. There's a lot of odds against him, and he comes in and he just kind of soaks it in and has patience behind the line. His ability to hide behind these linemen, it's almost like a little version of Le'Veon Bell when he would just sit there and wait and then
Yes.
bang, hit the hole and take off. But now you have him at 5'5", where nobody can see him. He's just going to be like a gerbil taking off. You're not catching it. And so, no, I
Exactly.
completely agree. I love the aspect that, maybe his shiftiness in the passing game can work great. But yeah, let that starting offensive line open up a gap for him, and it's going to be trouble.
Yep, yep. Gotta shout out my boy AJ from Cowboys Can Fan in the chat right now. What's up, AJ? Another, just bringing up that Le'Veon Bell patience and stuff like that. I think back to Zeke's rookie season with Leal calling on all of those pull runs, and he would get out in
Yeah.
front of Zeke, and Zeke had the patience to stick behind and then explode out of those. If you use those with Deuce Vaughn, it could be very, very scary very quickly. Um,
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking, honestly, realistically, for a line for me, stat line, um, I honestly think 500 yards is in play as a rusher. Add in another 300 yards as a pass catcher. Now that's if he gets the volume of carries as a running back two. If he's demoted to running back three, obviously I'm not expecting those stat lines. But the reason why I believe that he can get 500 rush yards as a rookie, as a running back two, which doesn't seem like a whole lot. Obviously, the bulk of the carries are going to go to Tony Pollard, but 500 yards. You think about one run, this guy kind of has that Saquon Barkley esque home run ability. I mean, he could
Yeah.
amass 40 yards in a single run that quickly. So, I think it's completely in play. Very, very excited for what Deuce can bring to this team. Going on to the next guy in preseason that I thought was pretty good. Had the little hiccup with the interception in the red zone, but Will Greer, I thought that he was actually pretty dialed in there. What was your thoughts?
Definitely going into the second half, he dialed in. I think
Yeah,
going into the first half of this game after
yeah,
last week, I don't know if he was just trying to be perfect or if he was forcing too much. course, you saw the scramble around the for the sack, lost like 20 yards, put him in
Hmm.
punting range.
Yeah.
It's just those kind of decision making. But it seems as though there was a talk or a turnaround there at halftime. He really came in and started showing some real patience, kind of like the drive you talked about, where I don't want to call it dinking and dunking, but he was using his progressions very wisely comparatively to the first 6 quarters of play that he had.
Yeah.
So I do like what he showed. I mean, it's obviously a safety option at this point. I don't know as far as like a 53-man roster outlook that they
Hmm.
do end up taking him into that third spot. I mean, you'd have to have him and Cooper Rush neck and neck to be like, okay, this is a good idea to have him on reserve.
Yeah.
But I don't see him making this team unless he comes out next week and just explodes. But it's mainly the decision making for Will Greer that gets me. It hasn't changed.
Yeah. Well, one interesting point though, I think about if you really wanted to keep one of these guys, or let them go in order to keep some of these guys and put them on IR afterwards, because they have to make the initial roster to put them on IR, from my understanding. So I think
Yeah.
that Cooper Rush is one of those players that wouldn't go through waivers because he's too old. So if you technically cut him on the initial cuts, and then um, you just say, "Hey, we're going to sign you back. Obviously, we're going to throw some guys on the IR and then get you back in here." That's an option. I don't know if Will Greer is uh, um, qualifies for that necessarily. So interesting to see. Obviously, Will Greer, like you said, showed some kind of what's the word I'm looking for, where he was all over the place basically. But then he
Yeah,
also showed
sporadic.
some yeah, sporadic, exactly. But he also showed some ability to hang there in the pocket and deliver some nice throws. um he was kind of, yes, dinking and dunking a little bit on that tight end drive, but ultimately you can't go broke when you're taking gains. You hear that
Right.
saying said to quarterbacks all the time because it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're getting gains, you're not going to go broke. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to win the game. That's not what it says. It's just you're not going to go broke. You're obviously going to get your stats, and you're going to move your field down, or your team down the field. Now, with that
Right.
being said, Will Greer does need to show more as a full football player. Right now, his quarterback play isn't better than Cooper Rush's. So if you want to beat out Cooper Rush, you have to show more with your legs. You have to show an understanding of, hey, let me stop running in the backfield and just throw it out of bounds. Get outside of the pocket where it would be a intentional grounding and throw it out of
Right.
bounds. Those plays can make a difference, and they seem like such small things, but over time, the coaching staff's going to realize, hey, this guy isn't taking negative plays. He's not taking the sacks, and not only is he not taking sacks, but he's also getting 3, 6, 9 yards by his legs. He has another
Yeah.
factor
Too
that
much
Cooper
depth.
Rush doesn't have. So interesting to see what happens with Will Greer ultimately. But is there any
Yeah.
other like standout players that you saw during that game 2 preseason game?
It's hard to say standout because the ones that I thought were going to stand out either did or got injured. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
after covering that, it's kind of like, okay, who's going to step up? Who's going to show here that they can take the role of somebody who is out of the game or who can build off of last week? I really liked Jabril Cox. I think more than some other people did. I
Hmm.
just felt like he had so much more patience and will to plug a gap, to hit a run fit. He just seemed much more willing than being hesitant the week before. His ability in open space, I don't think has ever been questioned. Just the amount of speed within that whole linebacking room, but
Yeah.
Jabril Cox really stood out to me versus Game One, and that says a lot going forward with DeMarvin going down.
Mm.
I don't know that they do look exterior for another linebacker or for a vet to come in. Maybe they do trust it and see how it goes. But Jabril Cox, I think he did what he needed to do to keep his position after some guys falling down.
Yeah. Well, it's weird with Jabril Cox because either A, you're going to side on this guy can finally do it, even though we have years of him not being trusted by the coaching staff or whatever it may be
Right.
where he didn't get on the field, or B, we're going to have to let ties with this guy, go with this guy, when you should have done that, you know, possibly as early as last year. considering he
Yeah.
wasn't on the field in favor of Damone Clark, who
Yeah.
was a rookie
Almost
last
at
year
all.
coming off of spinal fusion surgery. So,
Right.
um, extremely confusing situation with that. And then you factor in his contract. If you are going to play him and he shows out, you're kind of like a little too late. You're going to have to pay the guy or whatever because you just didn't trust
Yeah.
him to put him on the field and he shows out. Kind of, I don't know. It's a weird situation with Brillo, but overall in that preseason game too, I did think that he covered sideline to sideline pretty well. He had some nice run fits and he got out there and made some open field tackles, like you were saying, wrapped up. You can see his speed. Out of college, he was more of a coverage linebacker. I
Yeah.
wasn't completely. I didn't really see him covering all that well. Preseason game two. I thought he was better in the run department, which is kind of weird because that's
Yeah.
not what
That's
he's
what
known
shocked
for.
me, I think. Right.
But overall, he's gonna have to step up if he wants to make the team. You got Demarvion Overshown that went down that was probably ahead of you. I think he was ahead of you on the depth
Yeah.
chart. So you got to step up. You got to show this coaching staff because you probably are going to play the majority of game three. Um, you got to show them that you can do it and that you can be a leader on the field. Not only a leader, but just um, be able to just do your job. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
fill in those run gaps, cover the occasional tight end, running back in the flats, and do your job because
Right.
the other players around you are the ones that are the premier players, the superstars, if you will, of if you play Madden or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but either way, just do your job, show the coaches that you can, and you have an understanding of the game. For me, one of the players that I thought kind of popped off a little bit. Now, it wasn't against the number ones or anything for Seattle, but Junior Fehoku. This was his first preseason action. He actually had the highest pressure rate on the team last game.
Hmm.
I posted a few videos of him, his family. Saw them, favored him, retweeted him. It was kind of cool to see
Hmm.
that from them. But overall, I just thought that he was very impressive, high motor guy. I thought his hands were really good for a rookie,
Absolutely.
shedding some of those tackles and just beating them to inside moves. Um, I thought that he had an understanding when you're playing a mobile quarterback, whenever they break contain out of the pocket, when to play coverage and when to surge towards them and force them to pass the ball. I thought he had a lot of instincts personally, so I'm curious to see what you thought about him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree. I think what I initially loved most about him was some of the things we talked about before, his versatility. But
Hmm.
I really noticed it this game when I was shocked to see him standing up on the edge.
Yeah.
And the fact that they can use him in that type of D-law type of role and shift him down into a three and maybe move Micah up or whatever it may be if he's on the field in the regular season. Just that type of versatility is what's going to get you on the field. And when you have hands that were as quick as what he could showcase, being able to use that on the edge while also staying low and staying through your motion as a defensive tackle, as a three tech, if he
Hmm.
can pass rush out of all three of those positions, you absolutely have somebody more worthy of a role than maybe a Chauncey Golston or even Neville Gallimore if you're listing him as a defensive tackle, which I
Yeah.
actually did. Um, I think you did as well, did you not?
Yeah. I have him as a D tackle.
Yeah.
I think just with Dan Quinn's relation to Seattle, how they used Michael Bennett in the past, he was kind of a three tech defensive tackle slash edge player. So yeah, I kind of see Feihoku in the same light. Um, Another player that's a rookie that I thought had a good game in some respects, but also, I mean, he was a victim of a big play, was Eric Scott Jr. Just JSN comes over with the shallow across the field, then turns it into a go route over the top. Um, Interesting, just overall that's concept, the route concept. I think that it just got the safety really beat with that shallow concept. He thought that he could roll over to the other side, clear that route, and take that away. And then JSN just keeps going up the sideline and a
Yeah.
perfect throw by Drew Lock right there to get it over
Yeah.
there over Eric Scott. Now, what I will say about that is Eric Scott was a little bit late getting his head turned around, and by the time that he did get his head turned around, he couldn't get his hand in the right position to get a pass block or pass defense. But overall, he had some nice plays. he had another play on third down to force a punt, where he got a pass defense. He had some
Mhm.
tackles and stuff like that. So I think that that's a little bit of an overreaction to some fans seeing that he got that big ball on him. But overall, I think that he
Yeah.
does need to show the ability to be better than some of these other guys, the Nashawn Wrights, the Kelvin Josephs of the world, because they traded up in the draft to go get this guy. You've got to see a little bit from him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the amount of depth that this team has already, you can't allow those types of plays. I mean, it looked like he just got stuck looking for the ball as Jason kind of turns back upfield a little bit. But like you mentioned, it was a perfect ball. That is a first round draft pick. Eric Scott, at some point, I think you do have to cut a little slack with the fact that
Yeah,
he did
yeah,
have a great pass breakup. And with a lot of this depth on the team, he's simply fighting for a spot, and you can't take one play in a single game and match that against everything else that he's been able to showcase throughout 2 3 quarters, whatever it may be.
yeah,
I think he has a lot of stickiness to him. He actually shows quite a bit how much he can stay in the hip pocket of his receiver. And I think that type
yeah,
of, when you're not allowing that type of separation, you even saw it on the JSN almost touchdown on that catch. That there's a lot to work with there, and if he can straighten out his facilities, his mental game when he's just looking for the ball instead of staying consistent with the receiver, then that's something that can absolutely be fixed. And you could be looking at yet another 53 uh, man roster spot for Eric Scott.
yeah. So I didn't watch him initially, but whenever we drafted him, I went back, tried to find all the film I could on him. He didn't have a lot. I mean, he's a small school
No.
guy, but what I
Yeah.
did see is that he was much, much better playing in zone schemes where he could have the ball in front of him and dissect it, drive on balls, get those pass defenses. So, right there, he was left out to dry basically in a man concept.
Mhm.
You only had the single high safety, the shallow pulled the safety across to the other side, and he was left out there by himself in trail technique and from what I saw, I didn't think that he was a great trail corner anyways. So he kind of got he was the victim of a perfect route design,
Right.
perfect ball by Drew Lock, and just it wasn't really in his skill set. Not saying that he can't get there, but I thought, let's cut a little slack
Yeah.
for Eric Scott. Another guy that Cowboys Twitter has been basically crapping on, Eagles Twitter crapping on him as well. Mazi Smith had to bring him
Yeah,
up
man.
sometime during the show. What were your thoughts on Mazi?
There's there's two sides of the spectrum, and people in the, whether it's our fan base or of course the Eagles fan base, they're picking the very far of each side, and nobody's realizing that the truth about Mozzie Smith is directly in the middle. His skill set and that type of strength is, it's unmatched. It's, you can't argue that. It is there, it is proven.
Hmm.
But being a one tech in the NFL is not a put on the pads, go hit somebody, and go be whoever you want him to be. Go be a superstar. I understand he's a first round pick, but you're talking about one of the toughest positions to play in the trench on either side of the ball,
Yeah.
and to not give him any time to try and figure things out when I mean, he comes from a school where he was not a primary type of pass rusher. He was a complete one tech, a complete space eater. He's
Hmm.
going to have to work on his hands to be able to separate double teams and everything like that. That it's going to take time. And I think a really good point I saw across Twitter about Mazi Smith is that he may look a lot different with the ones. It's not going to be immediate, but when you have high level edge play and you start stressing the outside of that pocket, it can start opening up a little bit more for Mazi Smith, whether it be the run or pass game.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're seeing with Dan Quinn his ability to use stunts. I don't think that allows the guards to um, help on those defensive tackles as much. They have to be more worried about dropping into their set and getting ready for the stunts that they're going to see on film the week before and understanding that stuff. Then you factor in the edge players, like you mentioned. You probably are going to be sending your guards to help a little bit on Micah Parsons in case he hops inside, uses a wicked spin move to the
Right.
inside. You're going to be wanting that stuff to happen, especially against these younger tackles in the league. They're not going to leave their younger tackles on an island against Micah Parsons. Same thing with Demarcus Lawrence to an extent. I mean, obviously he doesn't have the pass rush statistics to back up that as much, but this guy still gets pressure. He's one of the best run defenders in the league. You can't leave a young tackle on him alone. We saw what happened with Evan Neal last year in the Giants game. DeMarcus Lawrence got 3 sacks that game. So
Yeah.
then you factor in the guys like Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, Sam
Sam Williams.
Williams. Yeah, so
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
factor in those guys, and they're not going to be able to chip Mozzie as much. Now, with that being said, I did put up a tweet about this, but Jordan Davis last year, very very similar RAS scores, which is basically athletic scores.
Right.
Jordan Davis was top or like the 10 for 10 on his Mozzie 9.99 out of 10 on his score. So very similar players, very similar measurements. Everything was very
Yeah.
similar. Production in college. You go back and look at them. Jordan Davis, obviously, Cowboys fans wanted to clown the Eagles last year because Jordan Davis wasn't very good. Only saw about 18 attempts last year, on the field. And then as far as run grades went like that, he was basically average, not very good, not the elite run defender that they thought that they were getting. I think that you're probably going to see a very similar season for Mozzie. I didn't have Mozzie as a first round grade. I didn't even have him as a 1-2 grade. I had him as a true second round grade on my board. And I thought that he was going to get overdrafted because of his athleticism. Now, with that being said, you see D tackles, they take time to groom, like you were saying,
Yeah.
especially in the pass rush department. Give him time. Do not overreact. He's out there right now. He's playing way more snaps than he's going to in the actual regular season. I
Oh,
think that
absolutely.
they're just trying to condition him, get him ready, and say, hey, you've got 20 snaps this game. Every single time you're on the field, you better make those 20 snaps count. You got to go
Right.
100%. Keep your pad level down. As soon you better be ball watching because as soon as that center snaps that ball, get up, get under the pads of the tackle or the guard or the center, whoever you're lined over, and create that pressure from the inside where
Right.
the quarterback can't step up out from the outside pressure that's coming from Micah or Demarcus Lawrence, whoever it is on the outside. And I think that that's valuable.
Oh,
He
yeah.
doesn't have to be the great run defender right now. He just has to be that space eater.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it's gonna take, and, there were several things with his get off the line of scrimmage and standing up way too high. You saw him get
Hmm.
thrown around a little bit, and it almost shocks some of us because of how strong he is, but just give him time to adapt and learn how to use that strength at a much higher level play of football, because once you said like you said going into the regular season, those snap counts are gonna get cut, and he's gonna be a lot more energized. He's gonna have a lot more rotation along with Hankins over there playing next
Hmm.
to Osa or whoever it may be. And he's going to end up learning how to use that strength as leverage to either eat space or open up gaps for linebackers. I mean, it just takes time with defensive linemen, especially at the one tech position. People are overreacting by far. Now, you mentioned him being a true second round grade. I think the athleticism does speak for itself as far as drafting him in the first round. I do think the payoff is absolutely there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, the overreaction is crazy. We're going into preseason game three, where he can showcase more of his skills. Let's just be patient with the first round pick.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, and it's not even just that he was a second round pick or whatever. Like, I don't really care. Obviously, people late
Yeah,
first round, you're probably going to get a second round player anyways. Um,
just
my
how it
thing
goes.
is
Yeah.
it takes time. Um, Strength in college doesn't always translate straight over to the NFL. I mean, there's
Mhm.
college kid strength and there's grown man strength. That's a real thing. I mean, in the NFL,
Yeah, absolutely.
everybody is stronger, everybody is faster, everybody is, better at the game. So it's going to take time. Um, and obviously, the Cowboys fans have had the CeeDee Lambs, the Micah Parsons come in and just go, hit the ground running from day one. And so
Yeah,
we've kind of had that built into our idea of a first round pick the last couple years, and Tyler Smith to an extent as well. I mean, so the
yeah,
last
absolutely.
3 picks in the first round really have came in and had significant snaps and produced at a significant role. I would just say for defensive tackles, first of all, they're not a statistic monstered position anyways. They're not going to get the statistics anyways. And then you factor in just how much embarrassment of riches the Cowboys fans have had the past 3 years, and those other guys coming in. Pump the brakes a little bit on Mozzie. Let him breathe a little bit as a player. Um, Looking forward to this preseason game 3 against the Raiders, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
Yes, sir.
so, is there anybody that you really think like, hey, this is make it break it time? You have to have a good game, or you're not making the roster.
There are a few. I don't necessarily think of them as make or break because there's a couple of these guys that I think in game two proved themselves a role if they didn't already have one.
Okay.
One of the guys that I'm really going to be watching on Saturday is Kelvin Joseph. His
Mm,
ability to have built into game two what he struggled in game one. He had a couple nice pass breakups, both on a crosser over the middle of the field as well as on the sideline. I think he was just much more patient in watching the receiver's hips and staying with him. I really want to see him continue on that, if not do that every single snap that he's in game three, because they already love his special teams ability. But if he can actually start to progress at the cornerback position, maybe even play in the slot a little bit like we had seen in training camp,
mhm.
there might really be something there that we've been skipping over this whole time.
Yeah. So for me, it's weird because like I'd be like, hey, I haven't seen anything from Kelvin Joseph in a while. I'm watching the
Yeah.
game, and then I really focus in on him, and he would have a negative play, and I'd be like, what the heck? And then all I'm hearing, and I posted something on Twitter. I was like, man, Kelvin's kind of getting beat up right here on this drive or whatever it was. And because he had two back-to-back plays go where he let it up. I don't know if it was his zone or whatever. It doesn't really matter. From just the broadcast view, it looked like he was kind of getting beat up a little bit. Now everything coming out of Cowboys Twitter is the complete opposite. He's done so great in game two, and I'm not ready to say that, hey, he's ready, give him a higher, a bigger role on this team, just because of a preseason performance when we have actually seen real life reps in game from Kelvin Joseph and they weren't good. Now, do players
Very true.
improve? Absolutely, they do. He's going to get better, but overall, I personally think that he's more of a special teams guy. You want to keep him on the special teams. That's completely okay. Just don't tell me that's your backup plan in case a Gilmore goes down, in case a Dix
Right.
goes down. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you would trust much more in someone like Nashawn Wright to get in there instead of Kelvin Joseph, at least right now. But I think it seems like the coaching staff has actually really liked a lot of the things that Kelvin Joseph has done through camp and through
Hmm.
practice. And like I mentioned, already loving him on special teams. I think there's a role there, but just as you mentioned, I think we're on the same page that you would much rather see somebody who has earned that trust in game go ahead and step up if need be than Kelvin Joseph coming off of special teams.
Yeah, yeah. Gonna hit this chat really quick. Keith Schmidt, Zach, my boy is dope. Y'all are impressive. Had to highlight that chat for you, man. Scrolling up here, I wanted to get to this question real quick. That was posted in the chat before we even hit it. I'm making the show, but here's my question, anyways, in case I have to step away. If our defense secondary is as good as we think it can be, what nickname do we call it? My answer is the no fly zone. So if you had to come up with a nickname for this, I think that was Denver's, wasn't it?
Denver for no fly zone. Yeah, with Champ Bailey.
Yeah. Well, no, no,
Yeah.
not even with Champ Bailey, I don't think. It was with Keep Talib. Um who was that other corner they had there? Uh
Um,
I can't remember. It doesn't even
yeah,
matter. But
old,
I
very
but I
old.
think
Yeah,
that
I know who you're talking
it
about.
was Denver's nickname. So if you had to come up with a nickname off the top of your head, if you can't come up with one, don't even worry about it. But what would you call this secondary if they're as good as we think that they can be?
What number is Gilmore wearing again? Is he
20,
21 or 20?
21.
He took Zeke's number. For some reason, I was thinking 24 there for a second, and I was going to think like 24/7 coverage, but um, no, I have no idea. I mean, I like the no fly zone because I mean that's what it's going to be. Although you have two different types of corners there with Trevon Diggs and Stephon Gilmore. One who is going to touch the ball seemingly every time it's thrown at him, and one who is going to lock someone up so tight that they're not even going to get looked at. I don't know about a name. I'm not for sure about a name. Maybe we can see him in game
So
and come up with something
for me, what I thought, and I've been brainstorming this entire time trying to think of something kind of cool. I'm just gonna call them
behind the scenes.
5G coverage, man, because they got five
5G.
gangsters back there: Dono, Hooker,
I like that.
Curse. They
I
got
like that.
Diggs, they got Gilmore. Obviously, you can add in
Yeah.
some Bland, but 5G coverage, I think that we could rock with that a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that should stick. I like that.
All right, good to hear that one. Um, was there any other players that you wanted to see a little bit more from as far as a roster spot, possible player, in this game three?
Um, One of the names that I had marked down was Marquise Bell.
Mm,
I personally do think that he is a lock, not because of talent, but because of some of the injuries with Mukwamo and Donovan Wilson. I think he is going to get in there and get some playing time within the first couple weeks of the regular season. But I mean, going off of his preseason, it seems to me, and running with some of the ones during training camp. With those injuries down, that he can actually create himself a role here to stay once Mukuamu is back or Donovan Wilson is back. Just because Mukuamu can slide down and play nickel corner, or you can have Curse slide down into the nickel linebacker role. There's a lot of flexibility in that entire room that you might be able to keep all of them.
yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that you just look at the versatility with Donovan Wilson, with Jaron Curse, playing those linebacker position with DeMarvion Overshown going down.
Yeah.
You can possibly afford to keep a Marquise Bell in the building. So yeah, that's a really good point. Um, Possibly, and I think Steven or it might have been Jerry, but one of them mentioned Wanye Thomas as possibly playing some linebacker role. He's 6'3", I think, so he has
Yeah.
size, but I don't necessarily know if he's a linebacker or if he's ever even done it. Who even knows? Um,
I don't know. I don't.
but
I posted a video of him reading and reacting on a little screenplay out of what looked kind of like a linebacker role.
okay,
But that's something that's not even proven yet at all. I mean, you'd actually have to try and play with that throughout practice and see what his abilities are in the middle of the field. But that's funny to me. I don't see that happening
yeah.
necessarily.
So here's the question for you: are you worried about this linebacker depth? I mean, you talk about LVE injury history, Damone Clark spinal fusion. DeMarvion Overshown obviously just tore his ACL. You got Jabril Cox; he's had an ACL
ACL.
tear.
Mhm.
Other than Devin Harper and Malik Jefferson, um, from my knowledge, I don't know if they've ever had injuries problems, but the top three guys right there are all, injured, have injury past. Are you worried about
Yeah.
that? Would you bring in a veteran to kind of spell this unit a little bit so they're not all playing as many snaps as we kind of anticipate right now with only three legit, or really only two, because I wouldn't even consider Cox as a legit linebacker that you feel good about
Not
having
necessarily.
snaps. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm the front office, I'm immediately looking at someone like Rashawn Evans to come in, not to be your savior, but to be that veteran presence that can not only collect, but help push some of these younger guys a little bit more. You kind of saw it with Anthony Barr a little bit last year. He's not a perfect linebacker. He's older. He was serviceable, but that might be something needed right now because what are you going to do? What's
Yeah.
going to happen when you roll in there without DeMarvion Overshown and now Jabril Cox gets hurt first play, and you're left with Devin Harper, Damone Clark, and LVE right there in the middle of the field. I don't see them not almost like with the offensive line situation doing their due diligence and saying, hey, is there somebody serviceable that can come in here and help these young guys progress?
Yeah. And and for me, I don't want to see another situation where it's like, hey, we're good, we like our guys, then eventually somebody goes down and you have to
Yeah,
grab somebody off the street who isn't ready, who doesn't know the plays and stuff like that. And then you have to rely on him. Okay, well, we'll have him 1 week, 2 weeks in the future whenever he learns all this stuff. Get him in the building right now, allow him to learn Dan Quinn's scheme, allow him to
right.
realize what the safeties are doing behind him, what everybody else is trying to do in front of him. Get him in the building now before it's too late when inevitably somebody goes down in that linebacker room.
Yeah, yeah, you don't want to push things. You're going to create way too much chaos in trying to find out a solution with no time. And listen, I don't believe one bit that a single player or staff member within that organization believes that this is not their time, that this is not their year. You
Yeah.
can't afford to take these kind of risks going into a game where you don't know the solution or you're just picking someone off the street. I mean, this is something that the entire team collectively has created a chemistry that can win you a championship. And just kind of doing the we like our guys, we're going to test him out. It's not going to keep working. We've seen it in the past, and you can't fill gaps like that at all. They have to build chemistry, especially in a group like linebackers. There has to be a clear leader there, and if you're just going to wait it out, then yeah, I am very worried about this linebacker room,
Absolutely, absolutely.
or the
So
depth at least.
one thing that I was kind of thinking about, because I'm already over the preseason, I just want us to get to the real games.
Yeah,
This
absolutely.
first game against the Giants, do you see? Obviously, I think that a lot of Cowboys fans like, we own the Giants, whatever, we'll beat them. You know what I mean? Do
Oh yeah,
you honestly think that the Giants are for real? I mean, they made the playoffs last year. They won a playoff game. I mean, granted, it was against the Vikings. We destroyed them at
yeah.
their own house. But I'm just saying, like, do
Nonetheless,
you think that the Giants are actually a legit contender as a playoff team this year again?
I don't know that you can say they're not. I don't see any situation in where you can say that they have not proven that already within a division that wasn't necessarily tight, but was a winning division, one of the best in the league. I do think the Giants are for real. I can't seem myself to find more trust in Daniel Jones than the year prior, all the way back to when he was selected. But Daniel Jones, uh, bringing in some of this young talent for himself, trying to establish an offensive line in front of him. Maybe Saquon stays healthy a little bit. That offense can compete. I really think it can, just not within the division. I
Yeah.
don't know that they are jumping either Dallas or Philadelphia, facing those two defenses with what they have putting on their first team. I mean, great selection with Hyatt. I love the speed. We're going to get to see a little bit of that from that trash talk during his pro day when he where he was saying I can run routes. To I can't remember which Cowboys coach that was saying like,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right, let's see it. But I mean that'll be exciting to see. But within the division, no, I think the NFC wild card probably is in play for them. But I also think the Commanders are right there on their tail as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with the Commanders' comment as well. So for me, I think that it's time for. I think a lot of people look back on when Daniel Jones was brought into the building, brought into the franchise for the Giants, and see him as the same player. I think it's time to kind of give him his flowers. He's won a playoff game now. He reinvented himself as more of a running dual threat quarterback that has the ability to rush for 800 yards in the season.
Vanilla
Not
Vic.
not the greatest passer by any means, but he does have a nice deep ball. He finally has some weapons around him. You add Darren Waller, you retain Barkley, add Jalen Hyatt, get some of your other guys, Sterling Shepard back. Um, I think that the Giants are actually a good little litmus test for the Cowboys week one at their house. If
Yeah.
if it was played in Dallas, I would fully expect 100% guarantee win. Now, with that being said, though, the Giants, they have a really good coach. They have all of this time to scheme and to game plan for the Cowboys week one. I just think a lot of people are overlooking the Giants in this division. That's not to say that I'm a Giants fan or whatever. I don't want to, I just don't want to overlook anybody. I think that that's what happened. That's how we got the Texans game last year. That's how we got the Colts game last year. Granted, we pulled away
Yeah.
from the Colts in the end, but you overlook these teams that you think, oh, we own them or they're not good, and it comes back to bite you in the butt. I don't want any of that this year. I want us to
No.
steamroll every single opponent we line up against because we're a better team on paper and we prove it out on the field. Do you feel the same way about that?
Yeah, I do. I may not be as moved as you on Daniel Jones just because Uh, Kind of with the Jalen Hurts situation, you see one season, can you say he is that guy? He is that
Yeah,
good. But to your point, when you bring in somebody like Darren Waller, that kind of connection and the chemistry that Daniel Jones has been able to build with his tight ends previously, bringing in an all pro like that is going to help him substantially. It's going to open up the field a little bit more for him. So, I'm not going to disagree with you at all about Daniel Jones. I do like our matchups. If you're talking
yeah,
specifically against the Cowboys week one, I do like our matchups against guys like Darren Waller a little bit more than what they're going to see against us. But going forward, yeah, I don't think they're to be necessarily overlooked. Week one, I do think Dallas is going to pull out that win. I just think there's too much there to, or there's not enough underwhelmingness about the New York Giants that tells me they're going to come out and just
be
explode on
right
the
back
Dallas
up.
Cowboys. Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
but that doesn't go to say game two or later in the season that hasn't progressed.
Yeah, I think with the Giants, as far as their draft went, I was in love with their draft, what they got. Deontay
Yeah,
Banks in the first round. They follow that up with JSM, John Michael Schmitz, the center out of Minnesota. Then
yeah,
they get
love him.
Jalen Hyatt. All of those players I think are going to make big impacts. Now, pulling this back full circle, back around, how much can you really put on a rookie's plate? We talked about it with Mozzie. Are they really anticipating all of these rookies to be that good season one? I don't know that you can really ask that of them. That's going to take some time to develop. Now, with that
Yeah,
being said, I see the Giants as a better team on paper this year. I fully anticipate them to be a better team. Now, does that mean that they're going to have more wins than last year? I'm not so sure. I think that they honestly just won off of pure coaching last year and just the ability to win in tight games. If they can repeat that, then you have to honor that moving forward with Brian Dable. Um,
yeah.
Obviously, it time will tell, kind of with the Jalen Hurts kind of thing. Time will tell as well.
Hmm.
Now talking about this, I know that you hit me up on Twitter talking about the Commanders snapping that Ravens what was it,
Yes.
23 game win streak in the preseason?
25, I thought. I can't remember.
25. Wow.
I know it was since 2015 was the last time that
Wow.
they either lost or first won that part of the streak. Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
insane.
my question to you is, did you watch the full game for one? And if you did you were you impressed with Sam Howell? How does he look?
No, I did not watch the game to completion. I got the tail end of it coming back from work.
Okay.
But looking at Sam Howell, I don't think there's not much different than what you saw like against Dallas last year. But I do think there's a skill set there that people are not thinking about at all. Um, he's not some type of clear cut QB1, any type of franchise that's going to build around him. But I think under Eric Bieniemy, there's a lot to work with his mobility and his arm strength. I mean, the kid can really launch it, and to have a lot of young playmakers, including Terry McLaurin, who unfortunately did go down with an injury,
Hmm.
might halt that progression as a quarterback a little bit more. But just to see the amount of weapons that they're trying to build around a kid that has an obvious skill set and they want to try and work with, I think does speak wonders for him. I don't think there's any type of worry about seeing Sam Howell on the field yet.
Yeah.
But time will tell that he did not look horrible uh, last night against a team that has won however many 25 straight preseason games.
Yeah, I think that he was responsible for like 17 points last night. So
Yeah.
played good ball. I think that a lot of people, it's kind of funny to think about this, but Sam Howell has legs, Daniel Jones has legs. We know what Jalen Hurts can do. Dak might be the most stationary quarterback in this division. And it's kind of
I
funny
think
because
so.
you think like stereotypes like, oh, he's a black dude, he's supposed to run. You know what I mean? Oh, he's a mobile
Yeah,
quarterback. It's kind of
whatever
funny,
it is. Yeah,
but thinking about that, I mean, he honestly is the most stationary guy. He's the most, he has the best pocket presence. He has he can win
yeah,
from inside of the pocket. And I
absolutely.
think that that's kind of funny to think about Dak like that, especially from Mississippi State days where he was running
Oh
all over
man.
Alabama and stuff.
Yeah, he did it his rookie year too.
Yeah.
It was what I think a lot of us thought Dak Prescott was going to be moving forward was that all over the field kind of guy who's going to make plays with his legs. Obviously, the ankle injury doesn't hurt at all, but it is it is funny to look at it as Dak. He's going to shred you up in his own defense if he's sitting there in the pocket. It's going
Yeah.
to happen every single time, and for it, that probably speaks way more on his progression as a quarterback in this league and his patience, reading through his
Mm.
progressions and everything. That doesn't mean Dak still can't use his legs. They're just not what they were, and it's not the same role as these other three quarterbacks who are going to run all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that Dak Prescott gets most discredited for, honestly, for his ability to come into this league seen more as a mobile quarterback and develop into a true pocket passer. I don't think enough people talk about that, truthfully, because you see
No,
him in the pre-snap game, just understanding what the defense is going to do, anticipating that, realizing his hot reads, sticking on those, moving from the first read to the second to the third, getting deep inside of his reads, just the understanding of the game from Dak Prescott. You can see that he is a student of the game. Um,
yeah,
Very much like Dak Prescott is Jalen Hurts. He's kind of followed inside of that same kind of footsteps, as you will. Obviously, Eagles fans
mm,
will have something to say about that. Oh, he's not behind Dak. You know, what I mean, whatever it is. But I do see their
that's fine.
career trajectories a lot similar. You know, what I mean, they both came in
Absolutely,
as kind of the running guys. They both have made serious strides each year to get better as passers. Um, they both honestly have been diminished for what they have done because of the talent around them at one point in their career. There's a lot of similarities. So
yeah,
I mentioned that with the Jordan Davis thing and the Mozzie thing earlier. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of correlation there between those two players, uh, devoid of what either fan base wants to think of either player. There
right.
is, and it's interesting to see. Uh, so much hate in the division just because they wear a different color than you or whatever. Dak Prescott's a really great guy off the field, on the field probably too, and Jalen Hurts as well. I'm just tired of the constant hate. Oh, my guy's better. Obviously, you're gonna have that bias nature to it, but let's just let it happen on the field. Let the
Please,
players talk for
please,
themselves, and we'll see. And listen,
yes.
if we end up winning the Super Bowl, I'm gonna be talking trash. You better believe it,
Oh,
but
I'm going to be
not
unbearable.
right now. Let's simmer it. It's
Yeah,
preseason. Like I see too much of that stuff happening.
right.
But
I mean,
anything,
our fan base is known as the "this is our year" every single year. I don't think that speaks for actually most of the fan base. If
yeah.
anything, we know exactly what it's like to lose and to keep losing. So let's just
Hmm.
watch, which we didn't get last year. Let's please get to Dak Prescott versus Jalen Hurts or whatever matchup you want to see. And like you said, let it play out, and you can have your answer definitively right after that.
Yeah, I think that it's strange because I think a lot of fans in the Cowboys um side of things saw 2014 and 2016 as realistic years where we could have won the Super Bowl. The last year's team, I think that we all felt we're not good enough at receiver. We have some
No,
hiccups and stuff like that. But we saw the NFC being so wide open with unproven teams. We already stomped on the Brady's. The Packers didn't even make it. So at that point, we felt like, hey, this is so wide open. There's a bunch of teams that are inexperienced. They got the Niners with Brock Purdy. You got the Eagles that haven't been there with their quarterback. Like your quarterback, Dak, has been there more than either of these guys. Honestly,
yeah,
you didn't think that the Giants were ever going to make it to the Super Bowl. They could have possibly beat the Eagles, who knows? But I didn't see them getting to the Super Bowl for sure. So you saw it last year as like, hey, it's wide open. We could make a run for this. But at the end of the day, we saw the holes in this roster. Do you feel like there's any glaring hole in the roster right now that you could point to at the end of the season? Like, yeah, we probably should have saw that coming.
I mean, other than what we've pointed out already with some of the injuries taking place, no. This is one of the most complete rosters that I've seen, excuse me, from the Cowboys in quite some time since a couple of those years.
Yeah.
As of right now, I can't, unless you're talking about depth issues, the 11 that are being put on the field, I'm going to feel against 90, 95 really percent of the NFL, our 11 is better than theirs. It's just
Mm,
the way for them to be able to look at last year's concerns and strictly build on those really impressed me from the organization this offseason, which we're not really used to seeing them doing. So I don't know that there's any glaring holes other than just some depth worries. But I really like this team. I really like this roster. I think it is complete. I think you're looking at a wide receiver room that is so much different. Obviously, Dennis Houston was one of our starting guys week one last year. It's not like that anymore. We have different types of skill sets on each side of the field, on both sides of the ball. Everything complements each other with this roster, and I think Will McClay and the front office did a really fantastic job at preparing for what could be their legitimate window.
yeah. Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points. I think that um, as far as what you hear from analysts and people that really know football, they always talk about at the end of the day, it's coaching in the playoffs and it's defense. If you don't have one of those two and a good quarterback, obviously, but if you
Yeah,
don't have one of those three things, then you're probably not going to make it to the big game. Um, Now we've seen the Chiefs make it really without a good defense and win some Super Bowls.
yeah,
However, it's not very likely unless you have one of those really serious generational type of players. I think right now the coaching, you look at the coaching staff with us, we have all offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach, all of them have Super Bowl experience. You
mm,
look at some players that are hungry to make it further in the playoffs, got knocked out twice in a row from the same team these past 2 years. You've got a seasoned vet at quarterback. I honestly think that this is our year. You can bookmark this, come back, tell me I'm wrong when we don't make it there,
sorry.
whatever it is.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, I do see this team as being a very deep team. Now, with that being said, you look at the Bills, the Jets, Dolphins to
yeah,
extent, and in the same division, Chiefs, Eagles, Bengals, Niners, all of those teams are very deep in their own rights. But I just see so much talent. For the first time in a while, I'm not into that mid-season point where I'm like, hey, this could be our year. I'm starting off from the very
yeah. Right.
beginning this year. You know what I
No.
mean? I'm like,
Yeah.
I see this as such a deep team. I see this as only thing that can derail us is injuries, kind of a thing. Are
Oh
you kind
yeah.
of
Well,
same kind of a thing?
yeah, one of the things that I also love coming into the season with the coaching staff specifically is that they're on the same page.
Mm,
Comparatively to last year, I mean, what you had no idea whether Mike McCarthy was agreeing with Kellen Moore and what he was putting onto the field or not. Now they are all on the same page and they're handing it straight to Dak. Here you go. This is
yeah,
what we have lined up for this offense. You run it as you see fit, whatever you see from a defense on the field. I love that strategy by them. Dak Prescott has the full facilities, all the pre-snap reads that he needs to make. He's developed so far into that he has the ability to control the game himself when he's on the field. So just them being able to trust their franchise quarterback and be on the same page with what they want to do with the specific skill sets on this offense, it's so much more thrilling than the last couple years with Kellen Moore.
absolutely, man. I couldn't agree more. Um, I don't really have anything else that's on my mind to talk about as far as this week goes. Do you?
Not necessarily this week. Kind of like you said, I'm ready for the Giants week one. I
Oh
just want to
yeah,
get to that. There's a couple of these players that maybe versus the Raiders I'd like to see step up, but no, let's get the show on the road. Let's go ahead and get Dak Prescott and the Cowboys on the field.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. Well, tell people where they can find you, man.
You can find me on Twitter at oh my gosh, I lost it there for a second. Uh, Pulse of the Star at Pulse of the Star. This is a little bit. Everything is kind of being created newly for me, but we're taking steps there. I've had such a great time on this show and getting to meet so many creators, including EJ. Find me, like I said, on Twitter at Pulse of the Star. I have other social media platforms as well by the same name. Going to get some stuff pumping on those as well as soon as I get content created on YouTube, which is coming in the next week or so.
Awesome, man. I'm excited to maybe get on your show in the future and just talk some
Yes,
ball. It's
sir.
gonna be Gonna be a fun time, and I think that the original group that was on last week is gonna be doing a monthly thing together, which
Yeah,
should be really fun during the season. That's really all I have for you guys. If you like the show, please do consider leaving a like, sharing it if you want. Subscribe to the channel if you're not. You can find me at Boys in the Zone on Twitter and on YouTube. Well, you're on YouTube right now, so just go ahead and hit that subscribe
there you
button.
go.
Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.